Can you explain for Judge Couch what happened in that one instance?
The finance department they were reviewing documents that flagged a particular, item that she had submitted, Cindy Wilson submitted concerning a travel to a political event. I don't recall exactly how it was worded, but it was enough to get their attention, and it was brought to my attention, and then I didn't know what to do with it at the time. I'd never had it submitted to me like that before, so I'd never seen anything like that before. So I sent it to the county attorney, had him review it. It was Tom Markman in their law firm at the time, and he told me that I had to approve it, that I didn't have a choice in the matter, because it was not my job to govern or regulate the county council members. They did that on their own, and I needed to sign off on it. I then, as a result of that, I contacted my external auditors and made them aware of the situation and asked them what they thought about that, and they said I had to sign off on it too.
Does the county administrator serve as some sort of safety valve to ensure that the county council members abide by the State Ethics Act?
No.
Does the county administrator serve as some sort of safety valve to ensure that the county council members abide by Anderson County ordinances?
No.
Does the county council work for the administrator, or does the county administrator work for the county council?
The administrator works for the council.
Mr. Preston, there has been some discussion during this case about a real estate commission received by Bill McAfee. Do you recall hearing that testimony?
Yes.
What happened in that instance?
I really don't know a lot about it, other than it had to do with land sale, I believe, down in Belton. And Mr. McAfee, I think he asked for and received an ethics opinion regarding that. And because of his affiliation, I believe, with Allison Properties, he recused himself from a particular vote. I remember him at a meeting standing up and making the council aware of that. And he left the room, and they voted on whatever ordinance they were voting on, or the resolution they were voting on that night. That's all I know about it.
Is that the sum total of your knowledge about that issue?
Yes.
Do you remember the date of that check?
I do not.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Mr. President, I'm going to show you what has been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 60. Does Plaintiff's Exhibit 60 reflect date?
April 23rd, 2008.
The question I have for you is rather simple, Mr. Preston. What relationship does a real estate commission earned by Mr. McAfee in April of 2008 have with respect to an employment dispute you had with the county that did not arise until September 25th of 2008?
There is no relationship.
What relationship exists between the travel reimbursements that Mr. McAfee received from the county and your severance agreement, sir?
There is no relationship.
Does one have anything to do with the other?
Absolutely not.
Is there any bearing between the travel reimbursements and your severance agreement?
No.
Is there any bearing between the real estate commission that Mr. McAfee received 7 months earlier and your severance agreement?
No.
Mr. Preston, there was some testimony by a witness named Kelly Nichols. And what I'd like to ask you about, very specifically, is her testimony about the votes on your severance agreement. What, if any, conversations do you recall having with Kelly Nichols regarding potential votes on your severance agreement?
I don't recall having any conversation with her about the votes on my severance agreement. During that period of time, I don't know that I ever really had much to do with her through that time period. If I had have had any kind of conversation with her, it would have been the result of whatever I was talking to my attorney about. But I had no idea what they were going to do.
Who was your attorney?
Rob.
Austin?
Yeah.
And who was the county attorney?
Tom Bright.
Do you recall whether they were actively engaging in negotiations about the terms of the severance agreement?
They were.
Would Mr. Hoskins report information back to you?
Yes.
In this time period, it's true, is it not, that you knew there were 2 votes against you?
I knew there were always 2 votes against me. So yes.
Whose votes were they?
Bob Walter and Cindy Wilson.
Could you, during this time period, be pretty certain there would be votes against you from those 2?
Yes, and some miracle happened.
Mr. Preston, what, if anything, did you pursue to try to ensure certain county council members voted in favor of your severance agreement?
Didn't do anything.
What conversations did you have with them?
I didn't have any conversations with them.
What attempts did you make to persuade them?
None. I didn't try to persuade them at all.
Mr. Greer referenced a conversation with you. What do you recall about that?
Mr. Greer says he talked with me about it. I don't recall the conversation I had with him about it. If we had talked about anything of any substance, I would remember. I'm sure he would too. Mr. Greer's got a very good memory, but I don't recall having any detailed conversations about it. If we had talked about anything, I do remember Ms. Davis contacting me, and even Ms. Humphries contacting me and telling me that Mr. Greer was seeking information concerning the value of my contract. That could have been that.
Would council members routinely contact you if they were going to contact employees of the county?
Yes, they did.
Was Ms. Humphries an employee of the county?
Yes.
Was Ms. Davis an employee of the county?
Yes.
During the course of this trial, did you have an opportunity to learn that Mr. Greer contacted both of them?
Yes.
Would it have been normal and customary for Mr. Greer to alert you to the fact that he was contacting them?
It would have been, yes.
Mr. President, in the next notebook, you turn to Defense Exhibit 108, and specifically the second page of that. Do you recall a time when Mr. Thompson contacted you about employment?
Yes, sir, I do.
Can you tell Judge Cash when he first contacted you?
Judge, it's probably towards the end of February, first of March of 08.
What did that conversation entail?
Michael came in and he was talking to me about expressing concern over whether or not he was going to run for county council again. I had a brief conversation with him about that. I encouraged him to. I felt like he gave him some encouragement. He seemed like he was a little bit down. I tried to make him feel a little bit better about the prospects of it. I think he was kind of tired too of it. And he asked me, he said he really wanted to go to work for the county, and he asked me if I would consider hiring him if at the end of his term, if he didn't get reelected. I told him I would.
Now, let's look at what's been base numbered as plaintiff at 08079, and it's in Defense Exhibit 1. Do you recognize this document?
It's Michael Thompson's resume.
And what credentials do you recall Michael Thompson as having?
He has an MBA, of course, an associate's and a bachelor's degree.
And what work history did he have?
He was the in charge of purchasing at Bosch for a period of time.
Do you recall whether Mr. Thompson managed a securities portfolio?
Yes.
Or a commodities portfolio?
Commodities.
And what was the size of that portfolio?
$55 million.
Do you know whether Mr. Thompson had a background in real estate?
Yes, he did.
And based upon those credentials, as a county administrator, could you tell Mr. Thompson in the spring of 2008 with a fair degree of certainty whether he would get a job at the county?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because he was qualified. He's qualified, more qualified than probably 95 to 98% of the employees that we had working for the county at that time. Certainly qualified, more qualified than many of the management team.
What percentage of county employees have a master's degree or had a master's degree while you were county administrator?
I can't answer that specifically, but I know it was less than 5%.
And out of the applicant pool for a potential position, what percentage of the applicant pool has master's degrees or higher?
Probably less than 1%.
Is it fair to say in the spring of 2008 then, you could forecast a position would be available for Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Preston, could you look at Plaintiff's Exhibit 37 for me? Before we talk about this exhibit, I'd like to ask you a question. Who is Adrian Hicks?
Adrian was a buyer in the purchasing department, which was part of the Central Services Division.
What was her maiden name?
Hicks, I believe.
Did she later marry?
I believe so, yes.
What was her married name? At that time.
Williams.
Can you look at Exhibit 7 for me and tell Judge Couch what this document is?
It's a job advertisement for the assistant purchasing manager's job, Judge.
Do you recall who eventually obtained this job?
Adrian Williams.
And does Plaintiff's Exhibit 37 in fact reference Adrian Williams on its face?
Yes, it does.
Do you recall whether Michael Thompson also applied for this position that was advertised for the first time on August 5th, 2008?
He did.
What did you tell him?
I told him that we were going to promote from within. Adrian had been in that department for a long time, and that she was very qualified for the position. The division director and I had discussed that and felt like she would be the best candidate for the position.
Do you recall what position Adrian Hicks Williams previously had?
She was either a buyer 1 or a buyer 2.
And at the point in time when Michael Thompson was seeking further employment with the county, was he considered an employee for purposes of the county?
Yes, he was.
What difference would that make with respect to his hiring?
Well, it would be a transfer. I mean, we'd have him like any other elected official that either was defeated in office or went to work for the county or any other, as a county council member or statutory officer. It's a transfer.
Mr. Preston, when it says on Plaintiff's Exhibit 37, per Robert closeout 82908, do you know what that means?
No, I don't. I'm assuming per Robert means Robert Carroll, who is the division director, who would have been the one who would have been her immediate supervisor.
What would closeout refer to?
I assume it would mean the job was closed out at that time.
On page 2 of Exhibit 37, does Mr. Thompson's name appear here somewhere?
No, I do not see his name on this report.
If you can look at Plaintiff's Exhibit 41 for me, do you recall whether Michael Thompson applied for the buyer 1 position reflected in Plaintiff's Exhibit 41?
Yes, he did.
And can you look at Plaintiff's Exhibit 42 for me also? What does Plaintiff's Exhibit 42 reflect?
A buyer 2 position.
And is the buyer 2 position a higher or lower position than the buyer 1 position looked at in Plaintiff's Exhibit 41?
It's a higher position.
And does the buyer 2 ad in Plaintiff's Exhibit 42 reflect an applicant?
Yes.
How many?
1.
Is that consistent with the treatment of Mr. Thompson as a transfer?
Yes, it is. Yes.
When you treat a position and an employee as a transfer, is the ad opened up to the public?
They can be, but they don't have to be.
Mr. Preston, if you could look at Defense Exhibit 10 for me. A question about Defense Exhibit 10. Take a minute to look at it. What is it?
It's a copy of a check to Michael Thompson for training, along with a copy of the advanced travel request form that was submitted by Mr. Thompson. Appears to be a copy approved in finance and one that I would signed off on, along with a detail of the courses, the coursework that was taken.
And when did you say this was dated?
See the approval date or the date, my signature, the date of, that's the request date, 9/23/08, the date of departure, 9/26/08, the date of return, 9/28/08. I'm sorry, September the 24th, though. I see it.
To your recollection, was Michael Thompson receiving training for these appraisal issues back in September of '08?
He was.
And if you can look at Defense Exhibit 11 for me.
I don't have an 11.
Well,
You probably have it in here, it's just not tabbed.
may I approach you?
You may.
Sorry about that, Mr. Preston. Sometimes when you work late at night, forget dividers. What does Defense Exhibit 11 reflect?
It's a copy of a reimbursement check to Mr. Thompson, along with the travel request, Anderson County travel request, and a detail of the coursework that he's taking.
And do these documents further reflect